What do you say, everybody? And Roll Tide, welcome to Cover Crimson. We're going to talk about Bama getting set for their second scrimmage. What does this mean for where the Alabama Crimson Tide are going, including taking on Florida State? Depth chart, maybe some players to watch. We'll get into that and more. Brought to you by Pearl River Resort, Philadelphia, Mississippi, the Azaleas, the Oaks, two amazing golf courses at Dancing Rabbit. You don't need a membership. It's the Augusta you can play. And it's hour and a half from Tuscaloosa, 2 and change from Birmingham. We appreciate them, and we appreciate you. So like, subscribe, thumbs up, and know that we're on the Cover Crimson Podcast Network as well. Let's get the show started. So much to talk about today. I say that every day, but it's true. All right, Roll Tide, everybody. There's Clint Lamb. I'm Mick Gillispie. Good to see you guys today. Get in the comment section. Tell us what you're thinking. Clint, we're gearing up for scrimmage number 2, which means we're getting really close to real kickoff.
Yeah, everything is trending towards, that week 1, preparation for Florida State. And there's still some, I don't even know, with the quarterback battle already being settled, I guess maybe there's still an ongoing battle at guard, but it's probably going to be a rotation, and it's going to be a rotation regardless of who ends up starting there. Wilkin Formby seems to be the starter at right tackle. I don't know. It's kind of felt like that a lot of the positions, I guess punter is TBD. I think long snapper and kicker kind of settle with Connor Talty and David Byrd. Kick returner, punt returner, that's something that probably still, it definitely needs to still be settled. But I'm looking forward to seeing, or at least hearing, not seeing, but how some of these guys do after a very intriguing first scrimmage where the offense had a ton of success.
Yeah, look, you get into this point and it's like, okay, we know who the quarterback is. We know who the running back is. We know who the starting wide receivers are. Maybe there's some offensive line spots. You mentioned that. The most intriguing thing to me is how Ty Simpson's going to mesh with Parker Brailsford, how he's going to mesh with Ryan Williams. What's that going to look like? Who's going to be his go-to guy when he needs to make a big play? Is he going to go Jeremy Bernard because that's what Jalen Milroe did, right? Or does he find somebody else? I can remember over the years, like one quarterback leaving, and then all of a sudden their targets are different. They feel comfortable with different guys. So I can't wait to see what that looks like.
I think there's 2 things that you always need to pay attention to when it comes to wide receivers, and you've got guys returning and such. And really, I guess in a lot of ways this stems from like fantasy football, but like when you have a new offensive coordinator and you have a new quarterback, it's like, okay, the types of plays that one guy will call, like the Detroit Lions right now. Ben Johnson moved from being the offensive coordinator to the head coach of the Bears. They get a new offensive coordinator. What you always got to say, okay, how does that affect certain positions? Amon-Ra St. Brown there in the slot, Sam Laporta at tight end, Jahmyr Gibbs at running back. Obviously, these guys will all continue to be, more or less featured pieces and kind of, the big stars for that offense. But how, what does the play caller do in certain situations? Who's his go-to guy? Who's the quarterback's go-to guy? Because obviously, play calling can affect it if the primary read is one player, and that guy's open, then that guy's going to get the ball. But if you have to work through your progressions, what is that, what do those progressions look like? And then from a quarterback's perspective, you kind of will get what you call a safety blanket, and it's the type of route that's being run. Maybe it's just a check down to the running back that's what you always go to, or maybe it's a certain player, Jeremy Bernard, like you mentioned. So I'll be curious to see what that ends up looking like. And I'll be curious to hear how Ty Simpson does now that he's locked up the job. We talked about that, I think, earlier this week. It's his. It's official. He's Alabama's starting quarterback, the first time for him that has ever been said. How does he handle that? Does he go out there and have, oh man, this was the best scrimmage we've ever seen Ty Simpson have? Or, is it like, oh, well, he was avoiding turnovers, but then second scrimmage, all of a sudden he throws 3 of them, like what ends up happening? Or is it more of just a steady, typical performance from him? These are all things that we're going to be keeping an eye on this weekend. But who are some players, Mick, that maybe you want to hear how they perform in the scrimmage? What, offensive line, defensive line, like, is there anybody in particular that kind of stands out to you?
Oh, Keon Russell, right? I mean, I'm guessing he's the third string guy because they've said that Austin Mack and then Ty Simpson have a better command of the offense, right? He's still trying to figure it out. But you wonder what that means for Russell. I mean, if it all pans out the way we thought, he'll be the third string guy, and this is a good learning experience for him. But he's a guy that's come in saying that he wants to start as soon as he can, right? What's that process look like? And obviously he's the most highly recruited, highly rated player on the whole team. I mean, when you talk about recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, then that's both the quarterbacks, like, because Ty Simpson, his status has already been solidified at a bare minimum for week 1. And it certainly hadn't been presented in a way where it's like, hey, we're rolling with Ty. We'll see how it goes. So I think it's beyond week 1, but just saying bare minimum week 1, it's Ty Simpson. But what does that number 2 spot look like? Because by the time that the game actually rolls around on August 30th, they're going to have a guy who will be the player that they insert should something happen to Ty Simpson. Could be Austin Mack, could be Keelan Russell. Think it's trending towards Austin Mack, but now that you're getting further into this, Keelan Russell will have had another scrimmage under his belt last week, and we'll see how he improves week 1 to week 2, scrimmage 1 to scrimmage 2, to see if he's kind of trending in that direction where it's like, yeah, he's going to be a problem at some point for bare minimum Austin Mack. That's something definitely keep an eye on. I want to hear about how Isaiah Faga and Lennon Simmons do, and really it's the defensive line in general, but those 2 guys in particular, I'm so intrigued by them because I just wasn't expecting them to be a part of this conversation this quickly. And it's to a point where even Kane Womack mentioned they went from being guys who we thought would kind of take a little while to maybe potentially positioning themselves for some type of role. That's huge. I just, there's not a ton of interior defensive linemen on this roster, but the ones that they have, I think they feel pretty confident in, and I think that they can be really good. I also know that Alabama's offensive line has been doing some really good things in practice as far as consistently creating movement. I wouldn't say bully the defensive line, but there's been moments where they've been bullying. And I don't think that's an Alabama defensive line problem personally. I think that's Alabama's offensive line it's really coming together. But Yanze Pierre's another one up front defensively. Kane Womack kind of mentioned him by name, said he didn't get home last week in the scrimmage, meaning he didn't get a sack or anything. But, he's been consistently providing pressure all throughout fall camp. Does he continue to, make an impact on that front? What does that mean for his role? Keon Keeley is obviously another one that we need to be keeping an eye on, because I'm starting to think that, the rotation at Bandit might not include Kelby Collins. Now, I still think it's a possibility that he'll be out there or play out there, but the more I've thought about it, we haven't seen him work with the Bandits during the A-Day practice. He was exclusively working on the inside. So we keep assuming, and it's mostly based off of body type and the fact that we know that he prefers to play on the outside. Oh, he's going to be helping at Bandit too, but really I haven't even seen that yet. So why am I just assuming that that's the way it's going to be? He might be an interior guy only. That would certainly clear the path for Jordan Renaud and Keon Keeley to be the 2 primary backups to LT Overton. That might be your rotation right there. So keeping an eye on him. And then on offense, how excited are you, Mick, about this? We've been hearing some buzz about Caleb Edwards now, and I'm a big fan. I've shared that on this show many times. Big body guy, can do a lot of different things for you, but he's been generating some recent buzz enough where it's like, is this guy going to get on the field in year 1? with the uncertainty at that position, Josh Cuevas has been kind of, working back from an injury. Danny Lewis hadn't been 100%. Brody Dalton's still adjusting. Jackson Marco's still adjusting. Marshall Pritchett is battling back from an injury that he suffered or he was dealing with in the spring.
Right.
He's also still adjusting to, the college level. Jay Lindsey's really the only one who's been consistently healthy, and he's a returning guy. This type of situation, it creates an opportunity where a player like Caleb Edwards could step up and maybe actually assume a pretty big role.
Yeah, I mean, like the opportunities there. I mean, we've when you go out and get 2 transfers for the same position. I mean, I know different roles in the same position, but you're saying that we didn't feel real comfortable with what we had, right? And then that opens up an opportunity for somebody to step up and be the guy, So it's different stages, right? Like first thing you do is you prove that you can do the work, right? Like, are you showing up to work out? Are you on time? Are you self-motivated, right? Like, hey, you're not scheduled to be here, but are you here? And some of those guys, Jalen Milrow was a master of that, like doing all the extra work. And then you earn the respect of the coaches and your team and the staff by doing that. Then you got to go out and kind of look the part. Like, are you big enough? Are you fast enough? Can you make the plays when they, do you look like you can? Then go out and do it in the practices, right? Then do it in the scrimmages. You're still kind of one of those guys as a freshman where they're like, then you got to go out and do it in the game. And so I feel like he's kind of like, doing all these things. We were talking about Ryan Williams, a very similar situation last year. I mean, maybe not quite to the extent that Hollywood had, but it's like, hey, this guy's got to be on the second team. This guy's got to be on the first team, Hey, let's throw him in the game. And then all of a sudden, like, he's just making plays and making guys miss. And you're like, wow, by the Georgia game, you're like, yeah, he's just one of the guys, even though he's 17 years old, should be in high school. You hope that that's the situation here, because if he goes out there and just gets blown away in the game, Bama's in trouble. We keep hearing Cuevas isn't healthy. I worry about the same thing health-wise with Roberts on the offensive line. Like, are we going to get a healthy Roberts? We kept having the injured Roberts last year, and I think that hurt the offensive line. But if you're hurt, you know what? It's good having enough depth like the Juice Squad on that offensive line where it's like, hey, look, here's Vandermark. He's coming in. If you're not able to do the job, you're out there limping, you're banged up, take time on the sideline and let's put somebody in that's healthy. And I feel like at the tight end spot, it would be great if this generated a lot of competition, or if we could just rely on him. But that's good. I think that's good for this team, because when you talk about 3 of the biggest question marks, tight ends, I say special teams is number 1. Tight ends to me has got to be number 2.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly how the order I would put it. Like right now, like I have what I would call questions. I think there's a difference between questions and concerns.
Right.
And I think concern wise, special teams is the biggest concern because it's the biggest unknown. And just, you're losing impactful players at those positions. But then also tight end. And it's just, I don't think that the injuries, it's not holding guys out. They're all available. It's just they're dealing with some injuries, and it's presenting some opportunities where it's like, hey, if these continue to be a problem, how much are they hindering the players? And where do we turn to if we need to go to someone else? So I don't think anybody's in jeopardy of like missing the Florida State game at tight end, but I do think that they want to kind of figure out a pecking order and how they'll address certain things if certain guys aren't available. But Jaden Roberts is another one. Like, does he scrimmage this weekend? Does James Smith scrimmage? I will say James Smith missed, or was limited for most of the spring due to an injury. Jaden Roberts was banged up all of last year. He was not 100%. He is a tough guy and he'll play through it. But I was really hoping to see a healthy Jaden Roberts this year, and I thought it would make a massive impact on the offensive line. The fact that you're dealing with that again, one thing I'll give Gino Vandermark credit for, he came in as a late enrollee because he was a post-spring portal addition, if I recall correctly, and he immediately was able to fill that void, got a start early in the season, and performed quite well. Do I think he was great? No. I think surprisingly, he was a more effective pass blocker than he was a run blocker. But, just the fact that he came in that quickly, being a guy who wasn't really known from Michigan State, had started a handful of games and played some snaps, but he wasn't like an all-star player for them, wasn't a surefire starter for them. The fact that he transferred to Alabama and made the kind of impact he did, I thought that was a good evaluation by the staff. And, now he's a year further along in this system and getting bigger and stronger and working with Alabama strength and conditioning staff and everything else. But, he's great, what I would call insurance. And I say insurance, I would say the guard and the off-ball linebacker positions are in very similar shape right now in this sense. Jaden Roberts, in a lot of ways, is the equivalent of Deontay Lawson, where you don't know exactly what you're going to get from him. I think they were smart in adding a guy like Cam Dewberry because it gave you the fact that you lost Tyler Booker. It continued to give you 3 capable guards. If Jaden Roberts can continue to deal with injuries, which he had already done this past season, you have 2 capable guys who are ready to play or step up in there and be quality starters. Same thing for off-ball linebacker. Think it's going to be a rotation. Think all 3 are going to be involved. All 3 are going to be good, important players. But if Deontay Lawson has missed significant time in each of the last 2 seasons, including a devastating knee injury in November of this past season.
Yeah.
So the fact that you went ahead and added Nakai Hill-Green on top of retaining Justin Jefferson due to the JUCO rule, and if Lawson continues, whether he's back from this injury and then he just suffers something else, if that ends up happening, you still have 2 capable guys that you can turn to. The depth gets really thin at that point, like some of the depth options, but from an experience standpoint and just knowing what you have for sure, it gets really thin if Lawson were to miss any time. But, those are 2 spots that I'm very curious to see how the rotation ends up looking. How healthy is Deontay Lawson? How healthy is Jaden Roberts? These are all things to keep an eye on for sure.
Looking forward to getting into these mailbag questions. Not that one. This one right here. Ocean City residents in by Ocean City. Our friend Keith's over there. Look at that beautiful sunset right there on the awesome Maryland coast, right? Crab cakes, Secrets Bar, the boardwalk, fishing tournaments, music festivals, all of that at the back-to-back coastal style hotel of the year. They do a great job there. And I'll tell you, it's every time I look at this, I'm like, gosh, you got to get there. If I didn't have so many things going on, I'd be there right now. But we appreciate Keith. You guys go out there and say hi to him. The next round, they went there. Look, I got my next round shirt on. And they had a great time. LT loved it. He was telling me that he would love to go back again like today. So roll tide. Mailbag questions. You love these. And I do too. I want to hear what people want us to talk about.
Yeah, and I threw it up. I thought it would be a nice little thing. I like checking in with people. We don't record these live, or at least some of them we don't. And when we don't, we don't get the live reaction questions where we can address what people actually want to know. So I just wanted to give people an opportunity to ask some questions, and maybe we could get to a few of them. Let's see. So one of them so who is your prediction to be the freshman with the biggest impact on the season? Mick, do you have a guess or do you want me to go?
Oh, man. You go first because I got a couple guys on the top of my head right here. I want to hear what you say, and then I may go somebody different just because.
Yeah, so I think probably your best bet has to be, and I'm not going to include specialists. I feel like that's kind of easy. Asper Uhoff could end up being Alabama's starting punter. If he is, he'll probably end up making a pretty big impact one way or another. So I won't include him. I would say, the safest bet right now is Dijon Lee. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you got guys like Michael Carroll. You got Justin Hill. Justin Hill's one that, I keep wanting to come back to him and say, you know what, I'm going to stick my flag in the ground. I know there's a lot ahead of him, but I believe in this guy's talent enough that I'm going to predict that he's going to have a pretty sizable role. I just can't bring myself to do it because I love Quay Russaw, and we're hearing good things about Yanze Pierre. I don't think Jamarian Latham is going away. So I think that the most you're looking at is like Wolf 4. And if that ends up being the case, what does that even translate to? And I don't think any of the freshmen are set up for like starting roles and stuff. And I think even Dijon Lee, the fact that you got Cam Calhoun, who is an inside out option for you, it could be that Dijon Lee doesn't have a clear path to consistent, meaningful playing time, but I just think he's going to be a guy who's too good to keep off the field for most of the season. I think Ivan Taylor, if he can get himself into some opportunities, whether that's, because you have to because of injuries or because I think he's just a guy who starts figuring it out. It's just when you take one of your two starters off the field, are you getting that caliber of impact from Ivan Taylor? Because if you're not, then why not just leave those other two guys in the field? So that's something. I don't know if we see as much rotation as we saw last year, where it was a lot more of it was needed. But I would probably say Dijon Lee would be my pick.
Yeah, it's Dijon Lee was one guy that I was thinking about. Latsier Brooks, thinking about him. Chuck McDonald. It's all about who gets the opportunity. Michael Carroll could be a guy. Now, I don't know if you want a freshman offensive lineman, but I mean, you keep hearing about him in certain rotations where it's like, hey, you know what, this guy might get an opportunity. There isn't a Ryan Williams this year that's just so sticks out that you're like easy, right? If you'd asked me last year. But I guess if you said who, I mean, it's got to be what, Marshall Pritchard, right? Because of the position, we just talked about, like the fact that nobody's really that secure at the and the guy gets an opportunity, goes out there and makes a couple plays, and Cuevas is hurt, and they want to want to throw to the tight end or have the guy out there making plays. Somebody, opportunity could just lead to where maybe he's the guy. But if I said, if I just threw it out and I'm like, okay, who's the guy that's going to have the biggest impact for whatever reason, I just feel like it's Latsier Brooks, right? And I think because we just kept hearing about all the things that he was doing in practice, and then all of a sudden he's on the bike and everybody's worried about his health. And I know that, like, when you start like sliding down the wide receiver spot, you're like, okay, well, I got Ryan Williams, I got Isaiah Horton, I got Jeremy Bernard, I got Jalen Hale, Cole Adams, Rico Scott. I mean, you're starting to get pretty deep in there. When am I going to get an opportunity to get on the field, right? But I just think that if everything that we heard is true, right, that the guy's doing all this stuff, then maybe he's a guy that comes out, makes a couple plays, and then maybe there's an injury or you need him, they feel comfortable with him. He's the guy who turned the most heads, I'd say, up until this point of the freshmen.
Yeah, Latsier's another one who I'm curious to see or hear how he does tomorrow. We've seen him not wearing a black no contact jersey in some of the practice photos that's been released. We're 90% sure that he's back out there and going through the normal stuff. And so, what does he do with his opportunities in the scrimmage tomorrow? But you raise an interesting point. I think Dijon Lee ends up being the biggest, most impactful freshman. But I think the guy who has the clearest path to helping is either Marshall Pritchett or Caleb Edwards. And
Right.
I've been on the Marshall Pritchett train, but I think Josh Cuevas, and you keep saying he's hurt. I do, you're not wrong, but I would rather say banged up because he is continuing to practice and stuff. And I don't want anybody getting confused and thinking he's even a threat to miss. I think he's going to be available for Florida State, and probably Danny Lewis is too. But it's just, I think that the most vulnerable position that has a freshman who can threaten that position is the Y blocking tight end, in my opinion. And
Right.
Marshall Pritchett's more of an H move guy, so I would probably lean Caleb Edwards there. But we'll have to wait and see if he gets on the field, if he's good enough to get on the field. I love this guy's skill set. I just think he is such a complete tight end. You can do so many different things with him. Is he like is he a dynamic pass catcher? No, but I think like bare minimum, he's a slightly better version of Cam Latu. And I just think from a blocking standpoint, he has all those attributes and things that you want. And you got to remember Latu was making the adjustment from being an edge rusher, so he took a little bit longer to develop. Caleb Edwards could be a heck of a tight end for Alabama. There's no doubt about it. Next question. So let's see. Who do you think has the inside track to wide receiver 4 behind Hollywood, Germ, and Horton? I mean, I've been pretty vocal that I think it's going to be Rico Scott. I would actually view him. I'm not comparing the talent, but when I say this to the rideouts, but in the same way that all 4 rideouts were viewed as starters, despite the fact that you were only getting 2 or 3 on the field at a time, I think this group with Rico Scott will be viewed in a similar way. I think Isaiah Horton, Ron Williams, Jeremy Bernard, and Rico Scott will all be considered starters. They'll have varying degrees of impact. I'm sure there will be some games where you might see Rico Scott end up being a guy who gets highlighted a little bit more, or he ends up having a bigger impact. I think Isaiah Horton's going to make a lot of explosive plays downfield, going to be a phenomenal player. Jeremy Bernard's going to be, that steady, reliable, physical ZH presence that you need him to be. And of course, Ron Williams is going to be Ron Williams there at the top. So feel really good about that. Are you predicting anybody else? There are so many other guys who could slot into that wide receiver 4. I actually think probably the better question, and this is a fine question, don't get me wrong, but I think the better question would almost be, who do you slot as the wide receiver 5? Because then there's a lot of options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious about that. How much do we see Jalen Mbakwe, who seems to be like a guy who's disappeared, right? Cole Adams, Derek Meadows, who we talked about, Latsier Brooks, Bubba Hampton. I mean, there's so many dudes.
Jalen Hill.
Jalen Hill, which I think Jalen Hill's going to find a way to be on the field a lot.
I mean, yeah, and so I guess we'll kind of pivot. I did answer the wide receiver 4, but I mean, wide receiver 5 is completely up in the air. I could see it being Latsier Brooks. I could see it being Cole Adams. He obviously made a pretty big play in this past scrimmage, has been pretty reliable in fall camp. Jalen Hill has been a guy working back from injury. Certainly could see him being that wide receiver 5. Jalen Mbakwe is certainly in that conversation. Thought it was interesting. I don't remember exactly how high he listed Derek Meadows, but when Ty Simpson was asked about some of the other receivers, or just the wide receiver room, I want to say like the 3rd or 4th guy he mentioned was Derek Meadows. Not saying that means he's going to be wide receiver 3 or 4, but I just think the fact that Ty's mind went to Meadows pretty quick, I thought was interesting. So you never know. That is a possibility. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Let's see. Someone did ask who the 2 starting guards are going to be. We've already kind of addressed that, and I think it's going to be all 3. They're all going to be co-starters. It doesn't really matter who goes out there first. I think if Jaden Roberts is healthy, just give him the nod. Now, granted, if he's been banged up and it's been Gino who's been working the most with the first team throughout fall camp, maybe you rotate in Jaden just because he hadn't been as available. But I think, at this point, it kind of feels like Cam Dewberry is going to be a starter, and it's just a matter of who's going to start at right guard, and then there'll be a rotation. And then let's see, what other questions? Okay, so they clearly have the talent and some decent depth emerging on the offensive line. Biggest question to me is whether they will have the chemistry needed as a unit to be successful in both the run game and pass pro on a consistent basis. So do you have any thoughts on that, Mick?
You tell me what you think.
I think they're going to be fine with that, because you still got to think Woken Formby's played a lot of football last year. Gina Vandermark played a lot of football. Parker Brailsford, Caden Proctor, and Jaden Roberts. So it doesn't really matter who starts at right guard. You're at least going to have 4 guys who played football together pretty consistently last year. And then with Cam Dewberry, there will be an adjustment period, no doubt. I think Tyler Booker made Parker Brailsford better. I think in a lot of ways he made Caden Proctor better. Now it's those 2 guys' turns to kind of take the torch and then elevate the play of the guy playing between them with Cam Dewberry. But as far as gelling and being effective, I don't know, man. I like this Alabama defensive line. And like I said earlier, I've heard that the Alabama's offensive line has been handling its business in a lot of these practices. And so I don't think that's a negative on the defensive line because we've seen a lot of these guys be impactful, or at least two of them be impactful. So I think it more so speaks to the offensive line. I feel really good about that room.
Good. Told you guys, I worry about the run stops because I feel like the Michigan game and some of these games they lost last year, they couldn't stop the run. One thing that you can stop, though, is yourself from not looking good on game day. And we got you covered here. Crimson 20, rowback.com. That is 20% off all the Alabama gear or anything else you want at Rowback. So pick up the new polos. You got that awesome hoodie there. All of that stuff at rowback.com, 20% off each email address. Cover Crimson brings you Crimson 20, 20% off. I'm ready to get some. I've been looking at their shirts, by the way. They got some good stuff. I'm about to pull the trigger on one. Coker's looking for free. He's on here telling me he wants free Rowback stuff.
it's always the people that can afford it that want stuff for free. But you know what? I can't say I blame him. I think after doing some of the things he did, I think he should get a free.
Yeah, they should just give it to him. Any final thoughts, Clint?
Just one more question, just because I thought it was an interesting one from King Gilbert, and I haven't given credit like I normally do, and I apologize for that. But he said, "Hey Clint, with the amount of depth / versatility we have at Wolf and Bandit, do you think there's any chance Coach Womack adds a Saban-like cheetah package to our defense? Obviously, we don't have that level of talent. Just curious." I'll say this about that. Kane Womack, it's difficult to even get him to. In fact, I say difficult. It's impossible to get him to put a dime defensive back on the field. Like he lives out of this 4-2-5 personnel, and he'll move that Wolf around. He'll move the Bandit around, and sometimes you will see a couple of Bandits on the field because a Bandit has the ability to kick inside. But as far as like that base personnel, it's like a 4-2-5, or 3-3-5 if you want to consider the Wolf a linebacker. That's fine, but he's on the line of scrimmage a lot, so I kind of view him as a defensive lineman edge. But it's very tough for Kane to get out of that 4-2-5 look. And so now you're asking for him to, like, well, what position do you take off the field? I don't think there's any of their edges right now. The Bandits, yes. So if you're asking if they get multiple Bandits on the field alongside a Wolf, that will give you 3 quote-unquote edge rushers all on the field at the same time. And it could be LT Overton playing inside. Maybe it's Keon Keeley. Maybe it's Jordan Renaud. But even though I think Renaud and Keeley are more edge-only type of Bandits, but as far as like getting like 2 Wolves or whatever, that would involve – I guess you could get 2 Wolves and then still put a Bandit – as an interior guy. So that's certainly possible as well. I almost guarantee you'll see versions of that. I don't think it'll be the same thing. It won't have quite the umph because in that cheetah package, you had 3 Wolf styles of player, 3 jacks on the field. And they didn't all play jack, but more of the undersized outside linebackers on the field with Will Anderson playing on the inside. Sometimes it was Chris Braswell. I don't think you're going to see 3 Wolf type of players on the field at the same time, but I definitely think they'll get 2 Bandits on the field. Could also see them getting 2 Wolves, maybe having 2 edges that are Wolves and then a Bandit and then 1 interior defensive lineman. I could totally see something like that, but I don't think it'll quite have the umph. I just think it'll be something that they run. It won't have this fancy package that everybody looks at and kind of oozes over a little bit. I don't think it'll be like that.
We'll try to get you a practice report, scrimmage report, sometime this weekend, guys. We appreciate you being here. Brought to you by Pearl River Resort, Philadelphia, Mississippi, the Timeout Sports Lounge, Vegas-style sports book right there, hour and a half from Tuscaloosa, 2 and change from Birmingham. So you don't have to ride all the way out on a plane to Vegas. You can go to Philadelphia, Mississippi, and get all of the sports book experience, 20 big screen TVs, full-size bar, all the individual kiosks, like they got the stand-up kiosk where you just go up, punch in what you want, or the window that you can go to. And when you get there, table games and slots. You got the bars, Jeff Dunham, the comedians there this weekend, Tracy Lawrence coming in November. I love Tracy Lawrence, by the way. So anyway, Pearl River Resorts got you covered. Silver Star and Golden Moon Casino, the water park called Geyser Falls. Bring the family, let them go to the water park or the spa, and you go hit the golf course, Dancing Rabbit, and the in the casino. We appreciate them so much for putting us on every day. Clint, Roll Tide, check us out, Cover Crimson Podcast Network, and we'll see what happens on Saturday, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
To Pearl River Resort.